Welcome back, traveler. Not to where you came from, but to where something else began. Where stories were never just stories, and the sky was never really empty. Tonight, we begin a journey across time and myth and memory through 20 of the most whispered tales in human history. Alien civilizations, from the ones who came with light to the ones who never left. You've heard of them. In radio static, in late-night documentaries, in the quiet fear just after a dream. But no one has ever told you like this slowly, gently, as if your own mind were finally ready to remember. Because tonight, we begin with the story everyone knows, but no one truly saw. Roswell. 1947. When something fell from the sky, something not ours, and the world began to forget. On purpose. Maybe you don't just want to fall asleep. Maybe you want to go back to the first flicker of wonder, the first denial, the first impossible object. Too smooth, too light, too wrong to come from here. So breathe in, soft and slow. Let your body melt into the bed beneath you, as if gravity itself is trying to keep you still while your mind begins to drift. And if your heart beats just a little faster, that's only memory, stirring. If you feel watched, it's only because something in you is watching back. Welcome to the first night you truly listened. Now let me tell you what really happened in the desert, beneath a sky that never forgot. Welcome back, traveler. Not to where you came from, but to a place the world tries to forget. To where something unearthly might have touched the dust. Tonight, we begin not with a fantasy, but with a story so widely known, so often retold, that it has become invisible like a shadow you see only when your eyes are closed. This is Roswell, but not the version you've seen in grainy replays or old magazines. Tonight, it returns as something quieter, stranger, something you may have already dreamt. You've always wondered, late at night, when the air turns cold and your thoughts feel borrowed. You've sensed it, that feeling that the sky might be watching back. So let me take you there. Let me carry you to a warm, dry July morning in 1947 to a sleepy ranch outside Roswell, New Mexico, where something shattered through the silence, not with fire, not with fury, but with the soft certainty of something that was never meant to land. Breathe slowly now. Let your hands fall where they are. The bed is not a bed, it's a desert, ancient and waiting. And your breath is the wind, the kind that carries secrets sideways through time. Tonight, you remember what they tried to erase. It begins with Mac Brazel, a rancher used to silence and sky. That morning, something odd glinted in his pasture. Strange shards, scattered like forgotten sentences. The pieces looked like foil, but when crumpled, they smoothed themselves out. Weightless, silent, wrong. Not wrong like a broken toy. Wrong like a mirror that reflects the future instead of the now. He touched them. He turned them in his hands. And something inside him shifted. Not panic, not fear, but a knowing. He brought it to the sheriff. The sheriff brought in the army. And the army brought silence. They took everything, every scrap, every photo, every question, and they gave back one thing: a weather balloon. The explanation came fast, too fast. A press release went out, and then was retracted. A slip of the tongue, they said. But it wasn't the tongue that slipped. It was the veil. You feel it now, don't you? The tension beneath the surface. Like an itch in a memory you've never made. Like déjà vu in a dream you haven't had yet. Because Roswell isn't about proof. It's about presence. The stories didn't stop. They multiplied. Locals whispering about men in black suits, about hangars filled with cold, metallic things, about silence so loud. It hurt. One boy said he saw silver limbs in a ditch. A nurse claimed she saw a body too smooth to be born here. A colonel's eyes flickered during an interview just once, but you saw it, didn't you? There are photographs. There are reports. There are confessions made on deathbeds, spoken in trembling tones. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, you are not a skeptic. You are not a believer. You are something older, a listener. And you listen not with your ears but with your bones. The ones that hum a little louder every time someone mentions crash and cover-up in the same breath. You weren't alive in 1947. But somehow, you remember it. That eerie hush before the phone rings. That gut pull when the light flickers. That voice in your head that asks, what if? What if it really happened? What if something came down not to conquer but to remind? What if Roswell wasn't a beginning or an end, but a message? A crack in the world. A place where the story bled through. Feel your limbs now. They're not heavy. They're floating. Like memory fragments in zero gravity. You're not quite here. Not quite then. You're in between. Where the men wore suits too clean. Where the radar blipped with things no one could name. Where the desert swallowed secrets whole but couldn't digest them. They buried the story in plain sight. But like all buried things, it learned to grow in the dark. It became part of us. Of pop culture. Of conspiracy. Of bedtime stories told with a smirk, but listened to with wide eyes. And even now, when you stare at the stars, some part of you still waits for a shape to move against the black. A slow shape, not flying but returning. Roswell isn't about aliens. It's about remembering that you are not alone, that the silence isn't empty, that something vast and strange, and maybe even gentle, has already arrived and simply waits for you to notice. Let your mind slip deeper now, past disbelief, past curiosity, into the quiet certainty that this moment has lived inside you all along. Roswell wasn't just an incident. It was an invitation, and tonight, you accept it. Close your eyes. The journey begins. They said it hovered. They said it was silent. They said it was impossible. And yet, on the night of March 13th, 1997, something glided over the sleeping suburbs of Arizona. Something vast, something geometric, something so large that it blocked out the stars, one by one, like someone dimming the universe with their hand. The Phoenix Lights. You've heard the name whispered in documentaries, conspiracy podcasts, maybe even in the strange memories you thought were dreams. But tonight, you will hear it the way it felt like standing at the edge of something too large to explain and too quiet to deny. Let yourself sink into your pillow, as if you're back there a child on a rooftop. Your parents are asleep. The city hums below. And in the sky, a perfect black triangle, drifting without a sound. It began innocently, as these things always do, just after sunset. A few lights in the sky, red-orange orbs, 6 in total, in a loose formation. Eyewitnesses described them as like fire, not blinking, strangely still. Then the triangle came, not a tight triangle of lights, but an actual, physical triangle. 3 points of light connected by darkness. A colossal wedge that glided silently across the desert sky. It was larger than a football field. Some said it was bigger than a city block. Some said it was bigger than their entire neighborhood. And yet, no wind, no engine, no hum. Just a growing shadow, swallowing up the stars and the breath in your throat. You lie still. It's just your imagination. Right. Except the lights don't blink. They don't move like planes. They don't flicker like stars. They glide in eerie formation. So smooth. So slow. It's as if the sky itself is rearranging. The neighborhood dogs go silent. The insects stop chirping. The world listens. More than 700 people across Phoenix, Tucson, and even as far as Nevada would later file reports. From doctors to pilots to entire families standing on porches. Not drunk. Not delusional. Just present. Just staring. One former police officer said it best. It passed overhead. I could see the underbelly. It was matte black. No rivets. No seams. Just void. And that void was intelligent. Some thought it might be military. An experimental aircraft. A top-secret stealth project. But no known human aircraft flies like that. No silent lift. No drag. No wings. No noise. Just shadow. Just symmetry. Just a silence that felt engineered. When asked, the Air Force at first claimed it was flares from a training exercise. Flares that hover silently for miles in a perfect triangle, that blot out the stars and don't fall. Flares. You might ask, why Phoenix? Why a quiet desert city, away from the coasts or major bases? But look closer. The American Southwest is sacred ground. Before Phoenix, there were the Hohokam, a mysterious ancient people who vanished without a trace. Their canals still run beneath the city. Their petroglyphs still show sky beings, triangles, lights, visitors. The desert remembers. In fact, Native American tribes across Arizona have long spoken of star people beings who visit during specific celestial alignments, who walk soundlessly through dreams and sand alike. Could the Phoenix Lights be part of a pattern centuries older than radar? There's another detail most forget. The lights returned. Months after the initial event, smaller formations were spotted again and again. But this time, there were fewer witnesses. The story had already been debunked. The public had moved on. The sky was once again allowed to lie. But you haven't forgotten. Not really. Because there's something in your bones that remembers the hush before a storm that never comes. There's something in your breath that recalls the feeling of watching something watch you back. And in the long night of March 1997 over Arizona, it wasn't just a craft. It was a presence. A geometry of intention. They weren't just showing off. They were saying, we are here. We always were. We do not need to shout. So, what do you do now? Knowing this, was it a test? A warning? A greeting? Or maybe it was just a mirror held up to our skies, to our ignorance, to our refusal to believe what we see. Somewhere, a pilot might be looking at Earth right now, remembering the night they flew low, in peace, in silence, in shadow, and maybe, just maybe, they remember you, watching from below, with wonder in your eyes, and silence in your heart. You're sitting cross-legged on the grass. The sun is high and warm. A group of children is laughing behind you, their voices tumbling like wind chimes. You look up, and for a brief second, the world stops breathing. The trees do not move. The birds forget their flight, and the horizon splits open into something not meant for this earth. It's the kind of memory that shouldn't exist, except it did. And not just to you. In Zimbabwe, in a place called Ariel School, 62 children once saw something that made no noise, but left an echo that never stopped ringing. And tonight, you remember it with them. You are 8, maybe 10. Your school is surrounded by dry bushland, where the air smells like dust and eucalyptus. It is recess, a Thursday, September 16th, 1994. You are told to stay inside the fence line, but curiosity tugs you further. Like a whisper with fingers, you wander to the edge of the playground. And then, everything changes. A craft, shining, metallic, not spinning, just present. Like a thought made visible. It hovers above the brush, then lands, silence, then a figure, small, thin, black-suited, eyes so large they could drink the sky, skin like charcoal under moonlight, and as strange as it is, what terrifies you most is not the look on its face, but the feeling it sends to your mind. A warning. You can't quite describe it. But later, when the adults ask you, you'll draw the same shape, use the same colors, say the same words. So will the girl next to you, and the boy behind you, and your friend, who cried and said he couldn't stop shaking. That's the thing about mass sightings. They're not meant to be tidy. They don't happen to scientists or generals. They happen to children in uniform, with red dirt on their knees and pencils in their pockets. Because children don't know how to lie in unison. They don't hold meetings to synchronize memory. They just remember. And what they remembered in Zimbabwe was a face, not human, not cruel, not kind, just watching. A mind that didn't blink. A presence that pressed into their thoughts like a thumbprint into soft clay. And the message, it came like static through their nerves. You are harming your planet. Stop. How strange that the most urgent ecological warning of the 20th century didn't come from a priest or a president, but from the eyes of an alien being to a circle of small children. During recess, the headmaster didn't believe them at first, but then he looked into their drawings, saw the same almond eyes and black bodysuits, and the silent triangle-shaped ship. Then came the parents, and then the BBC, and then Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist, who flew to Africa just to listen. He didn't hypnotize them. He didn't prod or push. He simply asked, "What did you see?" And each child, separately, told the same tale. Not excited, not dramatic, just still. Like someone who has seen the moon blink. Years later, many of those children would grow up trying to live normal lives. Some left Africa. Some refused interviews. Some still dream of the eyes. But none of them ever said it was a joke. None of them changed their story. None of them forgot. And what does that tell you? Not just about aliens, but about truth. That maybe the universe didn't choose scientists or soldiers. It chose the purest minds, the least trained to distort, and the most vulnerable to clarity. Because when you want to whisper a truth that adults would dismiss, you whisper it to a child, and then you wait, for decades, if needed, until someone's mind, like yours tonight, is quiet enough to hear it again. You lie back now, wondering why we don't teach this story in schools, why it's buried beneath tabloids and ridicule and silence. But stories like this, they survive in the space between breaths. They wait for minds that are half awake, drifting between logic and wonder, just like yours now. So close your eyes, and as you do, imagine 62 small hearts beating at once. Imagine their silence, their shared astonishment, and imagine, if you can, what it must feel like to be watched by something ancient and silent that sees your future and still chooses to warn you. Not to dominate, not to scare, but just to say, you can do better. You drift now, slowly, into a world where that might be true, where that warning wasn't wasted, where children carry the stars inside them, and still remember the face. You dream of dust, not the dust of decay, but the sacred dust of beginnings. A golden shimmer under a copper sky, where two rivers cradle the earliest heartbeat of civilization. You're lying on warm stone, somewhere near the Euphrates, before the alphabet, before empires, before even gods had names. And yet, they were already here. Welcome to Sumer, the land that wrote the first stories but perhaps didn't write them alone. The Anunnaki, their name pulses like a drumbeat across 6,000 years of sand and wonder. Those who from the heavens came, the ones with eagle heads and eyes like polished obsidian, the ones with tablets, tools, and purpose. You've seen them in museums, etched into clay tall figures handing symbols to kings, wearing watches on their wrists before humans had even shaped time. Are they gods? Are they myths? Or are they something else entirely, engineers from the stars? Mistaken for gods by a civilization just learning how to count. The Sumerians never called them aliens. They called them necessary. The Anunnaki didn't ask for worship. They gave language. They gave agriculture. They gave mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, calendars. And in return, the Sumerians gave stories. Epic of Gilgamesh, the first hero's tale. A king who searches for immortality and meets beings who live in the sky, who ride chariots of fire, who store knowledge in crystalline tablets. Some say that's just myth. But what if it's memory? In clay cylinder seals uncovered from ancient Ur and Lagash, archaeologists found depictions of planets, all 9 including Pluto, thousands of years before telescopes. Coincidence or remnants of a time when someone showed us a map we hadn't yet earned. The Sumerian texts speak of Nibiru, a mysterious celestial body that appears every 300-600 years, home of the Anunnaki. Not quite a planet, not quite a god, but something massive and moving, with intention. Skeptics scoff. But what if the truth was never meant to be believed, only remembered? Close your eyes. Imagine the city of Eridu glowing in torchlight, its ziggurats stretching towards stars its builders could not reach. But perhaps the visitors could. One tablet written in cuneiform so fine it could fit on your fingernail describes how the Anunnaki descended from the heavens in flying boats and chose leaders from among the humans, not to rule, but to guide. They didn't conquer. They seeded. Human DNA, some say, shifted during this time. Bursts of cranial development, sudden jumps in agriculture, irrigation, writing, and celestial alignment. Too fast, too precise, too aligned with Anunnaki arrival myths. Are we their children, or their experiment, or simply their memory? Walking. In the British Museum, tablet VA243 shows something quietly unsettling. A human figure kneels. Beside him stands an Anunnaki. Between them, a solar system. Not a symbol, a diagram. How could they have known? Let's take a breath. Inhale through the ancient air, as if each grain of dust contains a line of forgotten text. Exhale gently, you are safe. Because even if the Anunnaki were real, even if they came to build, to plant, to uplift, they are not here to harm. The Sumerians didn't fear them. They collaborated. The word God in Sumerian Dingir is a star-shaped sign. It didn't mean worship me. It meant comes from above. The lines blur. Ancient astronaut theorists claim that the Anunnaki mined gold on Earth to sustain their planet's atmosphere. They used humans' genetically engineered hybrids as workers. It sounds absurd. But then again, so does flight. So does fire. So does the idea of carving reality into tiny sounds and calling it language. Maybe we were meant to forget. And maybe you're just now remembering. There's a strange comfort in the idea that the first gods didn't ask for temples, but offered knowledge. They gave us seeds, not only for crops, but for thought. And the harvest is still growing. Let me leave you with a final image. A quiet night in Ur. Candles flicker in the temple of Inanna. A high priest stands beside a visitor taller, with skin that shimmers faintly under the starlight. They do not speak, but they understand. Because some knowledge is older than words. And as you drift now, toward sleep, toward memory, toward that long ago Sumerian dawn, you might wonder, were the Anunnaki ever here? Or were they always within us, waiting for the world to remember how to look up again? Rest now. We've only just begun. You're floating now. Not in space, but just above a desert. It's quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. The air is thin. The land below cracked with centuries of forgotten sun. And you're hovering over lines. They stretch endlessly below you, like etchings on a sleeping giant's skin. Some form perfect geometric shapes, triangles, spirals, trapezoids the size of cathedrals. Others are unmistakably alive, a monkey with a coiled tail, a hummingbird mid-hover, a spider with impossibly long legs. And none of it makes sense unless you're not standing on the ground, unless you are, in this moment, from the sky. Welcome to Nazca, southern Peru, roughly 500 BCE to 500 CE, a culture with no cranes, no satellites, no aircraft, and yet, somehow, designs that span hundreds of meters, perfectly aligned to lunar cycles, solstices, and stars. The Nazca people are long gone, but the Earth remembers their questions. Or perhaps, the messages they were answering. Because the real question is not how they made the lines, but rather, who were the lines made for? You've probably heard of the Nazca lines, maybe in school, maybe in a dusty museum book, maybe in a strange YouTube video at 3 a.m. But they never showed you what it feels like to stand inside one, to be surrounded by lines that don't just stretch out but upward, as if they were never meant to be seen by human eyes at all. Some say they were ritual walkways, offerings to gods in the sky. Others suggest astronomical calendars, or symbolic expressions of water and fertility in a desert so dry it hasn't rained in centuries. But there's one theory, whispered like a bedtime story no one wants to say aloud, that the lines were made for them. Not gods, not metaphors, but visitors. From the sky. Think about it. Why else would you create images so massive they can only be seen from thousands of feet above? Why else use straight lines so long they vanish into the vanishing point? Or design a hummingbird that only makes sense if you've seen flight from above? In the 1960s, Swiss author Erich von Däniken popularized the ancient astronaut hypothesis. He believed the Nazca lines were a kind of runway, a visual beacon for spacecraft before the word spacecraft existed. Of course, the academics rolled their eyes. And yet, they could not quite explain how lines remain intact after 2,000 years, untouched by erosion or wind. They could not explain why some designs align with stars only visible during specific epochs, long before modern astronomy had a telescope to name them. And they certainly could not explain why indigenous oral traditions in the region mention gods with shining skin, fire voices, and the ability to descend from the sun. The spider, for instance, is drawn with an anatomically correct detail that only becomes visible under a microscope. How did they know? Maybe they didn't. Maybe they remembered. Maybe the Nazca people were copying something they'd once seen, a long, long time ago. But only from below. Maybe they were responding to a message with a message of their own. We see you. We remember. Come back. And then they vanished. No one knows exactly how. No war. No mass migration. Just a silence so wide even the desert couldn't fill it. Now imagine this. You're an explorer in the 1920s. Flying in a rickety plane over Peru when you suddenly spot the hummingbird. Its wings stretch wider than a football field. Perfect symmetry. Not a mistake in sight. But from the ground, you'd never even know it was there. Wouldn't that chill your blood just a little? Wouldn't part of you wonder who else might have seen these shapes from above? Before you. And if they did, what were they looking for? There's something sacred about unanswered questions, about lines drawn in sand that defy logic but speak to something older than memory. The Nazca lines don't explain themselves. They don't tell us who made them, or why, or what they're meant to unlock. They simply exist beneath centuries of windless sky, inviting us to wonder and to look upward. Because maybe that's what they always were, an invitation. To believe that the Earth is not the only one sending signals, to imagine that the stars have seen us too. And maybe once, they answered not with noise, but with presence. And maybe, just maybe, they'll answer again. So for now, rest your mind gently in the dust of Nazca, as if your dreams were gliders skimming just above those ancient lines. And as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine this: a hummingbird, miles wide, drawn with love for eyes in the sky, and a people who never looked up in fear but with hope. You lie back, your thoughts softening under the weight of the night. The air is still, yet something hums just beneath it, like a memory you're not supposed to remember. Tonight, we slip into a darker corridor of the alien puzzle. Not the kind with spaceships lighting up the sky or children seeing visitors in fields, but the quiet erasers, the invisible librarians of secrets. They are called the Men in Black. You've heard the name, perhaps through pop culture or parody. But buried beneath the sunglasses and Hollywood charm is a much stranger, more silent presence. For nearly a century, there have been whispers, people who see something they shouldn't. Lights in the sky, shapes that don't belong. Then, soon after, there's a knock at the door. A car that doesn't make a sound. A man in a black suit who speaks without blinking. And after that, a silence. It begins in 1947, as most UFO tales do, with Roswell, the crash that cracked the world open. But almost immediately, strange reports surfaced. Military men, no insignias. Government officials, no records. Men with blank IDs, voices like radios, skin just a little too smooth. And always the same message: you saw nothing. You will forget. It never happened. In 1953, Albert Bender, a UFO researcher, shut down his own thriving organization overnight. He claimed 3 men in black visited him, not threatened him, but overwhelmed him. With information, with fear, with something deeper. His description was eerie. The men communicated telepathically, radiated cold. They told him, in no uncertain terms, to stop asking questions. And he did. Many skeptics have brushed this off as paranoia or psychosis. But the sheer volume of these encounters, decades apart, continents apart, yet strangely consistent, is worth pondering. Witnesses describe unnatural skin tones, expressionless voices, suits that don't wrinkle. Some even recall the scent of ozone or the ticking of unseen mechanisms beneath the men's skin. Then there's their behavior off, but almost comically so, like actors poorly mimicking human behavior, asking questions with the wrong intonation, not understanding basic items: forks, ballpoint pens, even money. Some seem amazed by ordinary human things, as if studying us. Others seem mechanical, like puppets on strings. Psychologists have weighed in. Perhaps it's a collective hallucination, or the brain's defense mechanism creating villains to rationalize unexplained trauma. But then, what do we do with the real reports men photographed leaving homes, captured briefly on video, or seen driving vintage black cars that make no sound? In 1967, Robert Richardson claimed he collided with a UFO in Toledo, Ohio. A few days later, 2 men in black visited him and demanded the metal fragment he'd retrieved. When he said he had sent it for analysis, they disappeared. He never saw them again. In 1976, Dr. Herbert Hopkins was studying a Maine UFO incident. One night, he received a phone call. Minutes later, a man in black was on his porch despite the long, winding road to Hopkins' isolated house. The visitor had no hair, even on his eyebrows or lips. His voice was flat. He asked strange questions, played with coins making them disappear, and warned Hopkins to destroy his research. As the man left, he seemed to fade, struggling with the steps as if gravity was foreign to him. And always forget what you saw. But what if we don't forget? What if the men in black are not cover-up agents, but protectors, guardians of secrets too vast for our waking minds? What if their mission isn't to hide the truth, but to delay it until we're ready? There are theories, of course. There are theories. Some say they are artificial intelligences, left behind by alien visitors to ensure cosmic discretion. Others think they're time travelers, patching rips in the fabric of human knowledge before we fall through. A few even believe they're not men at all, but avatars of a deeper, universal consciousness that manifests only when boundaries are threatened. You might wonder if they're so good at erasing memory. Why do so many people remember them? Maybe that's the point. They don't need everyone to forget. Only most. Just enough to keep the truth whispering rather than shouting. And in those whispers, we wonder why so many of these encounters feel dreamlike, as if they happen not fully in this world, but in some thin membrane between sleep and waking. A realm of foggy logic and flickering lamps, where the knock at the door isn't loud, but echoing, where the car outside seems real until you blink. Perhaps you've had a moment like that. A memory that doesn't belong. A voice that lingered too long in your thoughts. A shape, once seen, that you weren't sure you ever really saw. Tonight, as you lie in the dark, imagine a world where some truths are protected not with force, but with forgetfulness. Where the greatest cosmic secrets are hidden not in vaults, but in the folds of your own mind. You saw something. You remember something. But it was just a dream, or so they whispered. Now close your eyes. And if you hear footsteps tonight, don't worry. It's probably nothing. But maybe it's everything. You are lying still now, eyes closed, breath slow, and yet, in some strange corner of memory, a story stirs not from this life, but perhaps from another one, or from some shared dream whispered across generations. It begins in darkness, not the kind you fear, but the kind that watches. Let us begin with the eyes, not yours, but theirs. Enormous, almond-shaped, glossy as wet obsidian, too large for comfort, too black for trust, too silent for peace. These are the eyes of the Greys, the most iconic, most chilling, and perhaps most misunderstood of all extraterrestrial archetypes. Not monsters, not angels, but something in between. Their faces are smooth, their skin pale like a pearl drained of life, their nostrils barely slits, their mouths often unmoving. They appear in paintings, in dreams, in ancient petroglyphs and the testimonies of frightened farmers. They arrived in the American imagination like a shadow during the 1947 Roswell incident, but they've never truly left. Reports of the Greys go back further than you think. In 1891, a man named Colonel H.G. Shaw recounted an encounter in California with three beings he described as slender, smooth, and silent. They had large eyes, no hair, and moved with strange, deliberate grace. Shaw thought them from Mars. Others now say Greys. And yet, the real wave began post-World War II, when something shifted in the collective human psyche. The atomic age had arrived, and with it, the gaze of something else. From the early 1950s to the late 90s, the Greys became a recurring visitor in the accounts of alleged abductees. Betty and Barney Hill, in 1961, claimed they were taken aboard a spacecraft under hypnosis. Betty described the beings who approached her as having gray skin, large bald heads, and huge eyes like wraps of glass. Her description was eerily similar to drawings by others, many of whom had never heard her name. Coincidence or memory? You see, the Grey doesn't knock on the door of your life like a human would. They arrive at night, often in silence, sometimes through walls. They are not loud, they are clinical, observers, interfacers, and often, according to those who believe, they come with a mission. Some say they are here to study us. Others say they are harvesting genetic material to save their dying species. The term hybrid program emerges in these stories, a theory that Greys are creating part human, part Grey offspring, hoping to regain something they lost: emotion, soul, warmth. But it's not just the physical that stirs people. It's the way they communicate. In almost all reports, Greys do not speak with words. They transmit. Thoughts arrive directly in the mind as if they're folding your consciousness into theirs. Imagine a language without sound, without grammar, without time. Just meaning. Raw and silent. This communication is intimate, almost too intimate. One abductee said, "When they looked into me, I felt like they could see every memory I had, every joy, every shame." Another said, "It wasn't what they said. It was what I remembered after. Things I didn't know I knew." And here, you begin to understand why their eyes are so enormous. Not for vision, but for translation. Those obsidian pools are not looking at you. They are reading you, absorbing, rewriting. But perhaps the most disturbing question is this: if they are real, if even one of these stories is true, then where are they now? Why don't they make themselves known? Why the secrecy? Some theorists propose that Greys are not interstellar travelers, but interdimensional ones. They slip in and out of our reality like a dream passing into wakefulness. Some believe they are not aliens at all, but the future of humanity, returning to correct their own genetic collapse. In fact, under hypnosis, many abductees report being told that the Greys used to be like us, full of feeling, laughter, pain. But they went too far with their technology. They edited out discomfort, and in doing so, lost something vital. Now they come to us not to conquer, but to remember. There are also whispers that some governments know more than they reveal. In Project Serpo, an alleged secret exchange program between humans and a planet in the Zeta Reticuli system, it's said that 12 Earth humans lived with a Grey-like species for 13 years. Absurd, perhaps. But why is it that multiple unrelated abductees name Zeta Reticuli as the Grey's origin? And why is it that when you close your eyes, their face appears so clearly? You've never met one. Or have you? Here is the unsettling power of the Greys. They do not need to prove themselves to exist. Their presence is embedded in art, in folklore, in flashbacks during sleep. They haunt the subconscious because they operate there. And perhaps, late at night, when you feel something is off but can't quite name it, it is them, observing quietly from behind the veil of ordinary life. Not enemies, not friends, just witnesses, watching how we love, how we lie, how we hope. Their silence is not absence, it is strategy, and their eyes too large, too still are not blank. They are mirrors, holding the memory of 1,000 abductions, 1,000 hybrid dreams, 1,000 confused awakenings. You may not remember the visit, but they do. And now, as you lie back, drifting deeper into sleep, You wonder what if the Greys aren't here for war or science, but something even stranger. What if they are the soul of a species that forgot how to feel, quietly watching us, to remember what it meant to be alive? Sleep now. If you can. The eyes are already here. You close your eyes and imagine heat, not the burning kind, but the kind that shimmers, like reality bending in the distance. You're somewhere deep in Nevada now, on a forgotten highway where the world grows quiet and the map begins to lie. There is no sign here, no welcome, no warning. Just a road that stretches into the horizon and vanishes into myth. Welcome to Area 51. Or rather, welcome to the idea of Area 51 because officially, it doesn't exist. Or at least, not in the way we think. In the old days, people whispered about it. Then, they joked about it. Then, they stopped laughing. The base was just a speck on the map until 1989 when a man named Bob Lazar stepped forward, wide-eyed and serious, claiming he had seen something that rewrote the very definition of physics. He told stories of gravity engines, of reverse-engineered crafts, in Area 51, but in a facility nearby, called S4, where 9 alien ships rested like bones beneath the desert sand. Skeptics said he's lying. Believers said that's exactly what they'd want you to think. Because here's the strange thing. No one could prove he was wrong. In fact, records of his education and employment vanished, leaving only contradiction. What job erases your diploma? What workplace deletes your existence? That's when the myth cracked open. Area 51 had always been shrouded in secrecy. In the Cold War era, it was used to test U-2 spy planes, later the SR-71 Blackbird, and then the stealth fighters that slid through radar like ghosts. The airspace above the base remains some of the most restricted in the world. Even military pilots avoid it. Surveillance footage classified. Civilian drones confiscated. It is, quite literally, a hole in the map. And yet, strange things happen around it. Locals tell of lights that dance in geometric patterns at night. No sound, no trail, no explanation. There are stories of craft that shoot up vertically, pause mid-air, and vanish in a blink. There are even whispers of black triangles vast, silent ships, gliding just above the mountains, seen by dozens of people at once. But here's the twist. Area 51 never claims responsibility. It doesn't confirm or deny. It doesn't even reply. It just exists. And doesn't. So what happens when the world begins to wonder? You get the Storm Area 51 movement. Of course, a joke turned internet revolution. When millions of people pledged to see them aliens, it was funny, until it wasn't. The government took it seriously. Warnings were issued. Arrests were made. What kind of joke needs riot gear? And still no answers. Which is perhaps the point. Because Area 51 may be more than a military base. It might be a philosophical space, a mirror to our longing. We need it to be real. We want it to hide something vast, a secret big enough to explain the strangeness of the world. It is our modern cathedral of the unknown, a place where science, faith, and fear gather at the same altar. Think about it. Every ancient myth had a sacred mountain where the gods lived. The Greeks had Olympus. The Hindus had Meru. The Tibetans spoke of Shambhala. And we have a barbed wire fence, heat sensors, satellite patrols, and a runway that stretches farther than a commercial airport. We built our Olympus with concrete and silence. But there's more. Satellite imagery reveals hangars the size of stadiums, new roads, strange shadows. In 2013, the CIA finally admitted Area 51 was real, but only as a testing site. The word extraterrestrial was never used. In fact, that part remains taboo. And yet, in 2020, the Pentagon released 3 declassified UFO videos filmed by Navy pilots. These were not amateur encounters. These were trained observers watching craft that moved in ways no human vehicle could. The objects rotated mid-air, accelerated with impossible force, and defied known aerodynamics. One pilot, stunned, simply muttered, "There's a whole fleet of them, so where do such craft go after they're seen? If you had one, where would you keep it?" That's why Area 51 survives, not because we know what's inside, but because we don't. And maybe we shouldn't. Maybe the mystery itself is the message, the idea that not everything must be solved. Some places need to stay in shadow. Some fences don't keep people out. They keep dreams in, tonight. As you lie beneath your blanket, imagine a hangar in the desert where the lights never go out. A place where engines hum not with noise, but with gravity. Where beings from other stars may once have stepped down, leaving footprints that were quickly erased by wind and protocol. A base that exists and doesn't, and now, so do you. You are brushing your teeth. The water runs in the sink, cold and clear. You glance at the clock, it's 9:47 p.m. And then you are waking up, in your bed. Your mouth tastes like mint, but the sink isn't running anymore. And the clock says, 3:12 a.m. Your heart doesn't pound. That would be too easy. Instead, your body registers something deeper, a quiet dissonance, as though a string in your soul has been tuned to the wrong key. You should be alarmed, but mostly, you're just puzzled. This is missing time, not forgetting, not sleepwalking, missing, gone like breath on glass. And you are not alone. From truck drivers on midnight highways to farmers in remote Andean valleys, from children in South Africa to nurses in suburban France, the same story repeats. There was a flash of light, or a high-pitched hum, or nothing at all. And then, a strange silence. A cut in the film. You blink, and the world has moved without you. Entire hours, vanished, and something inside you feels quietly rewritten. The term entered pop culture in the 1980s, but its roots go back much further. In Irish folklore, the Sídhe ancient fairy folk could steal you into their realm. You'd return with no memory, only the uncanny sense that something had passed through you. In ancient Japanese tales, people walked into mists and reappeared years later, unchanged while the world aged. But in today's reports, the phenomenon feels colder, sterile. You're driving on an empty road. A white light pulses behind your eyes. You come to your hands still on the wheel, but it's 2 hours later. Your coffee is untouched, but you feel opened. Some describe examination tables, metallic rooms. Others remember tall beings with eyes too large to feel human. No one remembers being taken. They remember being returned. Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack listened to these voices. Lawyers, teachers, military personnel, people who had no desire for attention, and again and again. He heard the same things. The feeling of paralysis, the bright overhead light, the gentle, clinical calm of something non-human. And afterward, the haunting feeling that something is now inside you, an echo, a frequency, a shadow stitched into your breath. You look in the mirror. You are still you, but maybe not quite. Skeptics invoke sleep paralysis, hypnagogia, fabrication, and yes, Science has offered explanations. But sometimes the body says otherwise. Scars appear, bruises shaped like triangles. Some experiencers awaken with strange metallic objects beneath their skin, things that show up under scans, but vanish when sought. Others change. They begin to dream more vividly. Animals react strangely to them. Electronics fail in their presence. One woman in Denmark reported that birds would land near her and not fly away. But perhaps the most terrifying thing is not what is remembered. It's the gap. That empty pocket of unaccounted time. The quiet suggestion that someone or something pressed pause on your life, rearranged a few lines of your story, and hit play again without your permission. And still, no proof. Only the silence between moments. So tonight, as you close your eyes, trace the hours of your day in reverse. Were they all whole? Are you sure? And if not, if even one moment flickers like a bad connection, maybe something visited. And maybe it left with something you didn't know you had. Sleep well. Time, after all, is not always yours to keep. You stand at the edge of a wheat field just before dawn. The stalks ripple with the soft breath of morning wind. A golden hush stretches before you, serene, untouched. But then, as the light rises, your heart stirs. Something is wrong. Not violent, not chaotic, just impossible. Before you, flattened into perfect symmetry, is a shape too precise for nature and too silent for man. A spiral, a fractal, a mandala 100 meters wide, pressed gently into the earth as though the wind itself had traced it with invisible fingers. No footsteps lead to it. No broken stalks. The wheat is bent, not broken, curved cleanly at the base, as if by heat or some unseen pressure. You stare, half expecting it to vanish, but it does not. This is not vandalism. It is a whisper, a glyph, a presence. And it is not alone. Across England, in the heart of Wiltshire, across fields in Germany, Japan, Australia, Peru, and the American Midwest. Each summer, the ground blossoms with geometry, not random, not crude, but elegant, sacred, pentagrams within circles, hexagons inside spirals, Fibonacci sequences etched in barley. The patterns arrive overnight. Farmers report nothing. No sounds, no lights. In some cases, animals grow restless hours before the formations appear. Dogs barking into the blackness, cows refusing to move, and in the morning mathematics in the grass. Who draws them? That is the wound we cannot close. In 1991, 2 British men claimed responsibility for hundreds of circles. Skeptics exhaled. Case closed. But then came the ones with magnetic anomalies. The ones where plants had elongated nodes, burned from the inside. The ones where military helicopters circled overhead the very next morning. NASA satellites have cataloged some of the most intricate designs. Scientists like Dr. Eltjo Haselhoff have studied plant deformation in lab settings and found anomalies that mimic the effect of microwave radiation focused downward in spirals. Meanwhile, believers speak of messages, star maps, dimensional keys, communication attempts from something vast and wordless. Some circles are nearly impossible to reproduce without aerial guidance, yet they arrive in the span of hours, sometimes minutes. In 1996, a formation appeared near Stonehenge just after a flash of light was seen streaking across the sky. It was 9-15 feet across and perfectly symmetric. No signs of entry. No human explanation. Others suggest ancient memory, that these formations are not sent to us, but from us. That something buried deep in the subconscious, the memory of shapes, stars, Harmony rises to the surface like dreams in wheat. Still others whisper it's a test, that whatever intelligence is out there, it does not speak with mouths or machines. It speaks in patterns, in resonance, in beauty, and it is waiting to see who among us notices. So tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine a quiet field beneath the stars, a single stalk, swaying in the wind, and the hush before geometry descends. The moment when nature pauses and lets something higher draw its breath. Because perhaps, somewhere in the world, even now, a circle is forming, and in the morning, it will be waiting for you, not to explain, just to remind you that silence has a shape, and that some whispers don't need words, just a field, and the willingness to listen. There are moments in science that defy their own equations, brief flickers when the universe whispers something unexpected, then falls silent again. One such whisper arrived on the night of August 15th, 1977, and lasted only 72 seconds. But those 72 seconds would echo for decades. You weren't there, of course. You weren't in that quiet lab in Ohio, where a telescope the size of a football field sat listening to the sky. But let's imagine you were. Let's imagine you stood beside astronomer Jerry R. Amen, inside Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio Observatory, scanning frequencies, hoping the cosmos might speak. The night air was still. The stars spun their ancient arcs. And deep within the static, something blinked. A signal, narrow band, powerful, precise. It came from the constellation Sagittarius. It arrived at a frequency of 1420, 456 MHz, a frequency associated with hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. And one SETI search for extraterrestrial intelligence researchers had long considered a likely cosmic channel. And then it was gone. No follow-up. No repetition. Just a single spike in the data. So unusual. So perfect in shape that Jerry Amon circled it in red pen on the computer printout and wrote a single word in the margins. Wow. It has been called the most promising candidate for alien communication ever detected. Not a message, perhaps, but a hello. A footstep in the woods. A knock on the door before vanishing into fog. And the mystery lies not just in the signal's arrival, but in its silence. What kind of event could produce such a clean, strong, and narrow-band radio signal, so precisely tuned to a frequency of significance and yet never repeat it? Meteor satellite, cosmic ray, human interference, all have been examined. All fall short. SETI researchers have spent decades trying to replicate or explain it. They pointed other telescopes at the coordinates. They listened night after night. They found nothing. And this absence makes the signal louder, because the wow signal did not babble. It did not stutter. It was not noise. It was singular. Let's slow down here. Because this isn't just about a signal. It's about the kind of loneliness only a species with radios can feel. For centuries, humans have stared into the night sky and wondered if someone is staring back. We wrote myths about gods and stars, built towers to reach the heavens, drew constellations as if they were letters from someone else. And in the 20th century, we finally built ears big enough to listen. The Big Ear telescope was not glamorous. It had no dish, no great dome. It resembled an empty parking lot covered in aluminum sheets. But it listened. And on that August night, it heard something even the stars hadn't told us. 72 seconds, long enough to hold your breath, long enough for a heartbeat to change. When you listen to astronomers describe it, their voices soften. There is reverence, a shared shrug. We don't know. Some point to interstellar reflections. Perhaps the signal bounced from something distorted and accidental. Others wonder about secret military broadcasts. But no evidence supports these. What remains is the shape of the signal. The printout looks almost banal. Just a series of numbers and letters, 6EQUJ5. But hidden in that sequence is intensity, a flare growing stronger, peaking, then fading. It's not random. It follows the expected curve of a real source moving across the sky with Earth's rotation. In other words, if you were designing a test signal to prove you exist, it might look exactly like this. Now let's wander a little further. In the years since, we've sent messages back. The Arecibo message, the Voyager Golden Record, signals beamed deliberately toward distant stars, encoded with our mathematics, our biology, our music, our longing, and still silence. Except for 72 seconds in 1977. What if that was their answer? Some believe it was a probe, a passing eye that blinked and moved on. Others speak of time dilation, of signals sent from civilizations that may already be gone by the time we receive them. One haunting possibility: what we heard was not a beginning, but an ending. The last cry of a dying world. But there's poetry in that too. Because even a fading voice is proof that voice existed. Even a single footprint is enough to know we are not alone. And perhaps that is the purpose of the wow signal. Not to explain, not to communicate, but to awaken, to remind us that the silence between stars is not empty, but waiting, that the night sky is not a ceiling, but a door, that some things arrive only once, so we must be listening. Always. You look again at the stars. They seem the same, but something has shifted. Now, they carry a memory, a moment when, for 72 seconds, the void blinked, and maybe, just maybe, it saw you back. It begins in the dust-red cliffs of Mali, among rock-carved dwellings and whispering winds, where the Dogon people have lived for centuries. You walk there now, barefoot and slow, feeling the cracked earth beneath you and the press of time all around. There's no noise, only the hush of stone, the rustle of woven straw, and the ancient stories passed from lips to ears, one dream at a time. And one of those stories should not be possible. The Dogon, it is said, have always known of a star we only saw in the 20th century. They speak of Sirius, called Sigi Tolo in their language, as a bright star in the sky. But more curiously, they whisper of another star, a companion, invisible to the eye. They call it Potolo, a star so small it cannot be seen, so heavy, it anchors all. They say it is the densest thing known. They say it moves in a 50-year orbit around Sirius. They say it has been known for generations. Now, let's be still together and let that settle, because the thing they describe, this Potolo, fits the modern description of Sirius B, a white dwarf companion to Sirius A, discovered by Western science only in 1862 and confirmed with proper detail in the 1920s and 1930s, using telescopes and mathematics and spectroscopy. Yet the Dogon had described it far earlier, with no instruments, no satellites, just stories. And that is where the silence deepens. How did they know? How could they know? French anthropologists Marcel Griol and Germaine Dieterlen, who lived among the Dogon in the 1930s and 1940s, recorded the tribe's cosmology in intimate, detailed conversations. They were not just observers, they were participants in ceremonies, initiates in myth, listeners of something older than science. The Dogon told them that Potolo was made of sagala, a substance denser than iron, that it orbited every 50 years, that it was tiny but powerful. And they said something more. They said there was a third star, Emiya, smaller still, farther out. Now remember, we had not yet confirmed Sirius B's details when these accounts were recorded. We certainly had no evidence of a third star, but the Dogon had already carved it into their ceremonies. Every 60 years, They hold the Sigwi festival, a sprawling ritual that marks the completion of a cosmic cycle. It is said to realign the world with the stars. They build ceremonial masks and pass down oral knowledge so complex. It resembles a coded archive. Some dismiss this connection. Critics argue that Griol and Dieterlen may have influenced the Dogon stories, introducing modern astronomy and receiving it echoed back. Others question translation errors, or even romantic projection by the anthropologists themselves. But the mystery refuses to vanish, because the Dogon cosmology does not just mention Sirius B, it outlines planetary orbits, spiral motion, and the Milky Way's shape in ways that seem impossibly advanced for an isolated culture without metal telescopes. Perhaps it's coincidence. Perhaps it's the human tendency to find patterns where none exist. Or perhaps the Dogon knew something we forgot. Let's take another step back. In many ancient cultures, oral knowledge was layered, symbolic, protected. It was never simply about fact, it was about initiation. Truth was wrapped in story, nested in metaphor, encoded in ritual. Knowledge wasn't taught, it was revealed, in steps, through rhythm and trust. Could it be that the Dogon once received knowledge not from observation but from inheritance, from a civilization before them, from an encounter? That's the whisper in the wind, isn't it? Some have proposed that their knowledge came from a vanished ancient civilization. Others, more boldly, hint at contact cosmic visitors, star teachers, celestial maps handed down in firelight. But the Dogon themselves say the knowledge came from the Nomo. The Nomo, in their cosmology, are ancestral spirits, amphibious beings from the sky, from Sirius itself. The stories describe them as part fish, part human, descending in a spinning arc that splashed into a river and brought order to chaos. Myth, certainly, but remember, myths were the first science, and dreams were the first telescopes. To the Dogon, the Nomo are not fantasies. They are real presences, honored in chants, etched in sand drawings, and breathed into generations. So now, here you are, lying back beneath the night sky. You look up at Sirius, the brightest star in our heavens. It twinkles with ancient cold light, and beside it, though your eye cannot see, spins Sirius B, impossibly dense, the size of Earth, but the weight of the sun. It circles with quiet patience, just as the Dogon said. And maybe you ask how, but maybe the better question is, what else do they know? What truths lie hidden in dances, in sand, in bone-carved totems passed down in ceremony? What maps of the stars are still buried in lullabies? We often think of knowledge as something recent, something built by progress, printed in books, tested with machines. But sometimes, truth hides in old things, in dreams too deep to explain. Sometimes, the stars speak in riddles, and only the poets or the elders can hear them. And maybe, if you listen slowly enough, you'll hear the Nomo too, a ripple in the sky, a silence shaped like knowledge, a memory older than sight. You blink up at the stars again. They have not changed, but you have. You lie back, and tonight, you drift not just into sleep, but into Sanskrit skies. In the quiet pages of India's oldest epics, where gods battle demons and sages whisper to stars, there are verses that sound impossibly modern. These are not tales of horses and swords, but of flying machines, Vimanas streaking across the heavens. But how could ancient texts, some written over 2,000 years ago, describe aerial crafts with such eerie precision? Let's step into the skybound verses of the past, the oldest descriptions. The word Vimana appears as early as the Rig Veda, one of the 4 foundational texts of Vedic literature, composed between 1500–1200 BCE. While in its earliest form, Vimana simply meant palace or temple. By the time we reach the Mahabharata and Ramayana, roughly dated between 500 BCE to 300 CE, its meaning takes flight quite literally. In the Ramayana, the Pushpaka Vimana, the flying chariot of King Ravana, is described as a chariot that resembles the sun and belongs to my brother. It travels at the will of the rider. When Ravana abducts Sita, he does not flee on horseback or in a chariot pulled by elephants. He soars away in the sky. Valmiki's original Sanskrit describes the Pushpaka Vimana as the chariot which goes everywhere and is adorned with jewels, driven by thought. Even more intriguing is the fact that this vehicle is not mythological in function. It is presented as a piece of divine technology, built by the gods and operated by mortals. A craft that can change size. One strange feature repeatedly mentioned in these texts is the ability of Vimanas to alter size and appearance. They are said to accommodate many passengers, then shift down to individual form. Some are round, some are square, some are massive as cities. Others are like orbs. In the Samarangana Sutradhara, a Sanskrit treatise attributed to King Bhoja 11th century CE, one passage outlines how to build flying machines using light materials, describing gears, wings, and power sources that sound uncannily modern. And then comes the most debated document of all, the Vaimanika Shastra. The Vaimanika Shastra, ancient science or modern imagination. The Vaimanika Shastra claims to be a rediscovered ancient manuscript by a sage named Bharadvaja, dictated in the early 20th century to a medium named Pandit Subbaraya Shastri. It describes several types of Vimanas, including diagrams, aerodynamic details, metals used in construction, and methods of propulsion. Among its claims, the machines can travel to other planets. They are powered by mercury-based engines. Pilots must be trained in gyroscopic balancing and weather handling. It mentions anti-gravity and cloaking mechanisms. Sounds impossible. That's exactly what scientists thought too. In 1974, a team of Indian Institute of Science IISc engineers conducted an academic analysis of the text. Their conclusion was firm. The descriptions in Vaimanika Shastra do not conform to any known laws of aerodynamics. The supposed metals were not feasible. The technology appeared fantastical, but they also made one strange note. Though it reads like fantasy, it is internally consistent. In other words, if you accept its principles, the system holds up. It is a science of its own. This raised more questions than it answered. Was it a spiritual metaphor that imitates engineering logic? Or was it a memory of a lost civilization's real technology, mysticism, or misunderstood tech? Some scholars believe the Vimana references are entirely symbolic. The Pushpaka, in this view, is the soul, the ability of consciousness to transcend the material world. Flight represents moksha, spiritual liberation, but others point out that the technical specificity of certain passages is hard to dismiss. Why mention gears, alloys, gyroscopic balance, and planetary distances if you're describing metaphor? Why define dimensions and fuel mixtures in such precise proportions? In Hindu cosmology, the universe is a repeating cycle of creation and destruction, with each yuga, cosmic age, separated by floods and forgotten knowledge. What if Vimana knowledge was a remnant of a previous age? Echoes in other cultures. The idea of gods flying in machines is not exclusive to India. Ancient Egypt had the solar bark of Ra that sailed through the sky. The book of Ezekiel describes a wheel within a wheel that carries the Lord, with fiery engines beneath. In Mesoamerica, the god Quetzalcoatl descends from the heavens in a fiery tube. Even in Norse mythology, chariots of thunder roll through the clouds. Could all these references be different cultural memories of something that once flew across the ancient skies? Or are we simply hardwired to look upward and imagine something greater? The scientific perspective. Mainstream historians and archaeologists remain cautious. Most argue that texts like the Ramayana are poetic narratives, rich in metaphor, not technical manuals. But psychologists studying collective memory, the way civilizations remember myth over time, suggest that it's possible for distorted fragments of truth to survive in mythic form. Could ancient humans have witnessed atmospheric phenomena, meteorites, or strange visitors and preserved these moments in poetic scripture? Or were they describing what they saw as best they could? The cosmic timing of belief. In 1971, when Apollo astronauts brought back moon rocks, something subtle happened in India. Ancient Sanskrit hymns about Chandra. The moon re-emerged in popular discourse. The moon was no longer just mythic, it was reachable. And in that moment, even the oldest beliefs felt closer. The Vimanas then sit at the edge of possibility where poetry, memory, and imagination collide. Perhaps they are symbols of our desire to ascend. Perhaps they are visions passed down from another age. Or perhaps, just perhaps, they once hummed over a land now forgotten, powered by something more than mercury and prayer. You lie still beneath a black sky laced with stars, your breath soft as the air around you seems to shift. You don't remember falling asleep, but here you are floating somewhere between a memory and a dream. A whisper echoes through the cosmos. They came from the light. Welcome to the world of the Pleiadians, the supposed celestial beings from a shimmering cluster of stars known across cultures and centuries as the Seven Sisters. The Seven Sisters in the sky. Long before telescopes and star charts, ancient peoples across the globe lifted their eyes to the Pleiades, a star cluster about 444 light-years from Earth in the constellation Taurus. To the naked eye, 6 or 7 stars shimmer like a delicate silver bouquet. But through science, we now know the cluster contains over 1,000 young, hot blue stars, formed roughly 100 million years ago. Nearly every culture has a story about these stars. To the Greeks, they were the daughters of the Titan Atlas and the sea nymph Pleione sisters who became stars to escape pursuit by Orion. The Maori, Aboriginal Australians, Japanese, Hindus, Maya, and Cherokee all named and honored them. These myths suggest that the Seven Sisters were once close to our hearts, close enough to spark awe, reverence, and maybe even memory. Contact from the light. In the 1970s, the Pleiadians returned not through myth, but through a man named Edward Billy Meyer, a Swiss farmer who claimed to have been in direct contact with beings from the Pleiades. Meyer described them as tall, light-skinned humanoids with blonde hair and blue eyes, exuding peace and ancient wisdom. He called them the Pleiadians, a term he said they preferred over Pleiadians. According to Meyer and other contactees in the New Age movement, Pleiadians are fifth-dimensional beings, spiritually advanced and committed to helping humanity evolve beyond violence, ego, and destruction. Their technology, they say, surpasses anything we can imagine. But their greatest gift isn't hardware, it's awareness. Pleiadian messages often revolve around personal responsibility, compassion, environmental healing, and awakening human consciousness. Whether or not you believe Meyer's photos of flying saucers, the emotional resonance of the message has drawn seekers worldwide. The energy of light. Many modern channelers, people who claim to telepathically receive information from higher beings, also speak of the Pleiadians. The late Barbara Marciniak, author of Bringers of the Dawn, claimed to channel Pleiadian wisdom in poetic and philosophical downloads. She described them as our distant cosmic relatives, who seeded life on Earth eons ago and have returned to guide us through what they call a planetary rebirth. Marciniak's Pleiadians speak in riddles of time loops, multi-dimensional realities, and the illusion of physical form. They say that Earth is a school, and we are brave students playing a game of forgetfulness, learning to reawaken to the truth that we are beings of light, just like them. According to their messages, our connection with the Pleiadians is not new, it is ancient. They claim to have helped civilizations like Lemuria, Atlantis, and even early Mesopotamia develop spiritual systems and technologies rooted in resonance, light geometry, and interstellar balance, the message of peace. Unlike the frightening images often associated with greys or reptilians, Pleiadians are seen as gentle guides. Their contact stories do not involve abductions, experiments, or missing time, but rather light work, intuition, and dreamlike transmissions. Some believe that those who feel inexplicably drawn to the Pleiades, who find tears in their eyes when gazing at the stars, may have spiritual lineage that ties back to those beings. In various channeled accounts, Pleiadians say, "You are not alone. You are the bridge between worlds. You carry the seed of remembrance." Their messages align with many ancient philosophies, from Taoism's harmony to Buddhism's inner awakening, to Sufism's longing for divine reunion. In this way, the Pleiadians become not just alien visitors, but mirrors for the soul, science, skepticism, and the mystery of memory. Of course, mainstream science dismisses Pleiadian contact stories as psychological projection, myth-making, or fantasy. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. SETI listens for signals from advanced life, but none have yet been verified from the Pleiades. Skeptics point out that Billy Meyer's photos could be hoaxes, that channelers may be accessing their own subconscious rather than external beings. And yet, the pattern persists. Across continents, people describe similar beings, similar teachings, and the same star cluster. Why? Psychologists like Carl Jung once speculated that UFOs and alien contact might reflect archetypes, symbols embedded in the human psyche that express deeper truths. Perhaps the Pleiadians are not just literal extraterrestrials, but cosmic symbols, reflections of what we could become if we remembered how to live in harmony, beauty, and wisdom. Cultures that knew the stars. The idea that Earth cultures knew about the Pleiades long before telescopes is fascinating. The Dogon tribe of Mali, long before modern astronomy, described Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye. They also venerated the Pleiades and linked their calendars to the stars' cycle. The Hopi people of the American Southwest called the Pleiades Chuhukon, meaning those who cling together, and described them as home of the Kachina spirits, wise visitors from the sky. In Japan, the cluster is called Subaru and is seen as a symbol of unity and gathering. Could these ancient observations be echoes of memory, forgotten contacts preserved in myth? The Seven Sisters. Still watching tonight. Look up. You'll find them just above Orion, dancing through the dark in their eternal spiral. Perhaps they are stars. Perhaps they are homes. Or perhaps they are eyes, gazing back at us across time. The Pleiadians, if they exist, do not land in fire or noise. They arrive as a soft knowing, a pull towards stillness, a shimmer just beneath waking thought. They do not conquer, they remind. They do not command, they invite. And maybe what we call alien is simply a future version of ourselves, returning to help us remember what we already knew. You're floating now, far above the rust-colored plains of Mars, eyes slowly adjusting to the soft reds and oranges that stretch endlessly beneath you. In the distance, a ridge breaks the monotony, shaped with uncanny symmetry, almost human in its silence. Two deep impressions, like sockets, a line suggesting a nose, a shadow that draws lips across the dust. You aren't looking at a statue. You're looking at Cydonia. In 1976, the Viking 1 orbiter captured what would become one of the most enigmatic and iconic images of the space age. Taken at an altitude of roughly 1,800 kilometers, the black and white photo showed a mesa in the Cydonia region of Mars. At a first glance, it looked unremarkable. But then came the closer inspection. To many, it was a face carved, perhaps, by some long-gone Martian civilization. NASA initially dismissed it. Their own press release from July 25, 1976 joked about it being a face-like hill. But for conspiracy theorists, ancient astronaut believers, and even some open-minded scientists, it was enough to ask, what if the face wasn't a trick of light and geology? What if someone had placed it there? The mesa is nearly 2 kilometers long. The symmetry, when seen under certain light angles, appears too deliberate to ignore. Researchers like Richard C. Hoagland ran with the idea, proposing that the face on Mars was part of a complex of ancient structures, pyramids, fortresses, even city grids. Hoagland's book, The Monuments of Mars, pushed the theory into the mainstream, arguing that advanced intelligence once lived on the red planet. But the story of the face is also the story of our perception, how deeply human it is to see pattern in randomness. This tendency is known as pareidolia, a psychological phenomenon where the mind assigns meaning to vague stimuli. We see animals in clouds, shapes in burnt toast, and yes, faces in Martian rock. NASA never stopped observing. In 1998, and again in 2001, the Mars Global Surveyor returned to Cydonia with far more advanced imaging technology. Its high-resolution images, taken at lower sun angles and closer orbits, revealed the truth. The so-called face was a lumpy, weathered hill. No eyes, no mouth, no secret smile. Just geology. Just wind and time. Still, the myth endured. Why? Because the face on Mars sits at the crossroads of science and story. It reminds us that we don't just explore space for data, we explore it for wonder. The human mind craves mystery, especially when staring into the infinite silence of the cosmos. In ancient cultures, from the Nazca to the Dogon, the idea of beings descending from the sky is a recurring theme. When modern satellites show us something vaguely human on another world, our brains reach backward and forward at once. Backward, to myths and archetypes. Forward, to a possible future where we're not alone. Even among scientists, the image opened real questions. If intelligent life ever existed on Mars, how would we know? What would it leave behind? Could a civilization, like ours, sculpt something massive enough to outlive its creators by millennia? On Earth, we have the Sphinx, the Moai of Easter Island, Stonehenge. Why not Mars? Carl Sagan himself, rarely a man to indulge wild speculation, once entertained the idea that intelligent life could have emerged on Mars billions of years ago, during a time when the planet may have had rivers, oceans, and a thicker atmosphere. He didn't claim the face was proof, but he believed it was the kind of anomaly worth studying rigorously. In 2006, the European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter captured even sharper images. Once again, the illusion dissolved. The shadows were gone. The angles flattened. And yet, for many believers, the face only deepened in intrigue. They argued that erosion and thousands of Martian years could have blurred the original shape. They pointed out the apparent alignment of nearby formations, pyramidal hills arranged in geometric grids. Could a wind-carved rock align so neatly with others? Purely by chance. The truth, perhaps, is softer than belief or denial. The face on Mars may not be proof of ancient Martians, but it is a mirror showing us our own deep hunger for connection in the cosmos. In that sense, the face was never on Mars. It was always within us. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember every mystery begins as a whisper in the dark, and sometimes a rock can start a revolution of thought. You're driving at midnight on a lonely stretch of Route 3, surrounded by pine forests and the kind of silence that makes you question where the world ends and something else begins. There's no music, no voices on the radio, just the winding hum of tires on asphalt, and your spouse gently dozing beside you. This was the world Betty and Barney Hill knew on the night of September 19, 1961, as they returned home from a spontaneous honeymoon trip to Niagara Falls. They were just a normal couple, Betty, a pragmatic social worker, and Barney, a postal worker and World War II veteran. They were also an interracial couple in 1960s America, a time when simply existing in public could draw stares, hostility, or worse. And yet, that night, something even stranger watched them, the light that wouldn't leave somewhere near Indian Head, New Hampshire. Betty noticed a light in the sky, bright, erratic, and moving against the stars in impossible ways. At first, it seemed like a plane, but it was too quiet, too controlled. Betty, who had a background in social science and education, used her binoculars to get a closer look. She later described it as a pancake-like object with windows, flashing lights, and humanoid silhouettes inside. Barney was more skeptical until it came closer. He stopped the car. Through his binoculars, he saw beings not human watching him from behind the craft's windows. In sudden fear, Barney cried out, "They're going to capture us." Then came a blank. They remembered only vague fragments after that buzzing sounds. The car stalling. A lost stretch of 2 hours. Time had slipped. Missing time. Hypnosis. And memory. When they got home, something was wrong. Their watches had stopped working. Betty's dress was inexplicably torn. Barney's shoes were scuffed, and his leather binocular strap was broken. They couldn't account for 2 full hours of missing time. Betty began having disturbing dreams, repeating vivid visions of being led aboard a metallic craft, examined and questioned by beings with gray skin, large heads, and slanted eyes. The aliens communicated telepathically. She said, they spoke of peace, of stars, of genetic testing and ancient human contact. Barney, initially dismissive, began suffering intense psychosomatic symptoms, developing ulcers, anxiety, and insomnia. In 1964, the couple underwent regressive hypnosis with Boston psychiatrist Dr. Benjamin Simon, whose tapes would become the most famous hypnosis recordings in UFO history. Under hypnosis, both Betty and Barney described identical sequences being taken aboard a spacecraft, separated, examined, and returned. Barney cried during the sessions. He described a cup-like device being placed over his genitals, a surgical and dehumanizing procedure he could not explain. He called the beings not human, not even close. Betty described being shown a star map, which she would later recreate. It depicted Zeta Reticuli, a binary star system. At the time, that system was largely unknown to civilian astronomers, which later led researchers like Marjorie Fish, a schoolteacher and amateur astronomer, to claim that Betty's drawing matched a 3-dimensional alignment of stars as seen from Zeta Reticuli, a chilling coincidence. The cultural explosion. Their story exploded into the public in 1965 when a leaked report reached newspapers. And in 1966, Author John G. Fuller released The Interrupted Journey, a detailed book chronicling the Hills' experience and the resulting media storm. This was the first widely publicized alien abduction case, and it became the template for hundreds of reports that would follow. Missing time, medical experimentation, telepathic communication, genetic sampling, the gray alien archetype. Before the Hills, UFOs were flying saucers seen in the sky. After the Hills, UFOs came for people, skeptics and believers. Skeptics argue that the Hills abduction was a mixture of stress, dreams, cultural influence, including a recent airing of a sci-fi series that depicted similar aliens, and false memories under hypnosis. Barney, after all, was dealing with racial pressures and PTSD from war service. Betty was highly educated and imaginative, and yet, the emotional authenticity of their testimonies, especially under hypnosis, convinced even some hardened psychologists that something had happened, whether psychological or extraterrestrial. Dr. Simon himself was never convinced of alien involvement, but he concluded their stories were not delusional and likely genuinely believed by the Hills themselves. That sincerity is what kept their story alive. The legacy that lingers. Betty and Barney Hill's case became the blueprint for alien abduction lore in every country: Brazil, Japan, South Africa, Russia. Their story introduced phrases like missing time and abduction syndrome into the public consciousness. It was the first time mainstream America was forced to ask, what if this is real? In later years, Barney died in 1969 from a cerebral hemorrhage. Betty continued to speak publicly about her experience for decades, insisting with calm dignity that she had nothing to gain by lying. She passed away in 2004. Even now, skeptics and believers still cite the Hill case as either a psychosocial phenomenon or the first contact event in modern history. One thing is clear: after that night in 1961, the world would never look at the stars the same way again. You don't belong here. At least, not entirely. You felt that since childhood, not in a sad, lonely way, but in the quiet, glowing ache of remembering a home that no one else can see. Others built sandcastles. You built solar systems. Others played house. You asked why dreams felt more real than waking life. If you've ever stared at the night sky and felt homesick for stars you've never visited, you are not alone. There is a name whispered softly in spiritual corners of the world. They call them Starseed's children, born with ancient wisdom in their eyes and galaxies tucked beneath their ribs. But what does it mean to carry the memory of another world inside a human body? Let's fall gently into this mystery together. The idea of starseeds didn't originate from science fiction. It emerged from visions, trance regressions, dream journals, and ancient myth. According to renowned regression therapist Dolores Cannon, starseeds are souls who volunteered to come to Earth from other planetary systems to help humanity awaken during times of great transition. In her work, The 3 Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth 2011, Cannon describes 3 distinct groups. First wave, born in the 1950s-60s, feeling out of place, emotionally reserved, highly empathic. Second wave, born in the 1970s-80s, radiating healing energy through presence. Third wave, born in the 1990s-2000s, often referred to as new children, intuitive and tech-savvy from birth. These souls, she said, did not come for fame or recognition. They came to anchor light, to help Earth raise its vibration during a period of darkness and change. Cannon's findings mirror earlier prophecies from Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, who spoke of souls from the stars returning to Earth to help humanity evolve. His trance readings described reincarnating souls who had lived on ancient lost continents: Lemuria, Atlantis, even other celestial realms returning with knowledge encoded in their DNA. These are not just children who think differently. They feel as though they've remembered something, a mission, a frequency, a home. Many of them report recurring dreams of alien landscapes, of flying without machines, of hearing thoughts not spoken aloud. But perhaps the most striking thing is their loneliness. Because how do you explain to others that your real parents live on another star? Or that your childhood fears weren't of monsters, but of being stuck in a world that moves too fast and feels too loud? Author and channeler Barbara Marciniak, in her influential book, Bringers of the Dawn, 1992, claimed to channel a group of beings known as the Pleiadians, who describe starseeds as systems busters souls who incarnate to help dismantle outdated systems of fear and control. These children, the Pleiadians said, are here to teach by example, not through institutions or doctrines, but through living gently, creatively, and authentically. According to Marciniak, many starseeds carry memories not only of other planets, but of entire galactic cultures based on compassion, telepathy, and cooperative creation. They long for art, harmony, and meaningful conversation. They often dislike loud environments, competition, or rigid authority. Many are drawn to animals, nature, healing arts, or space science, as if some part of them is always trying to remember what they used to know. They are often labeled with words like indigo children, deeply intuitive, strong-willed; crystal children, sensitive, gentle, artistic; rainbow children, playful, light-filled, fearless. But all of these terms are branches of the same tree souls that don't feel from here. Skeptics often dismiss the starseed idea as fantasy, and from a purely scientific perspective, there is little proof that souls migrate across galaxies. No peer-reviewed journal will confirm the existence of cosmic reincarnation. But what science calls anecdotal, spiritual traditions call archetypal. And the patterns are striking. Psychologist Carl Jung believed in a universal unconscious, a symbolic ocean of shared dreams, memories, and myth that transcend time and culture. Perhaps these memories of other planets are not literal, but metaphoric echoes of this vast inner cosmos. Or perhaps the soul really does travel further than the mind can comprehend. Thousands of individuals, children and adults alike, have come forward with stories that seem impossible to fabricate. Children as young as 3 describing spacecraft in detail they've never encountered. Teenagers drawing constellations they shouldn't know. Adults entering deep meditation and retrieving vivid memories of ancient galactic wars, star councils, and non-Earth lifetimes. Some speak of having missions that haven't yet begun, a quiet knowing that they're waiting for something. There's even a pattern of synchronicity among starseeds, seeing repeating numbers like 1111, feeling intense emotions during solar flares or eclipses, sensing the energy of certain locations on Earth, like Sedona, Machu Picchu, or Egypt, hearing music or tones in dreams that unlock memories. Whether these are coincidences or cosmic breadcrumbs is up to you to decide. From a cultural standpoint, stories of sky people and otherworldly origins span the globe. The Dogon tribe in Mali knew of the invisible Sirius B star before Western telescopes confirmed it. The Hopi people speak of the Kachinas, spiritual beings from the stars who taught humans. The Hindus reference devas and flying machines, Vimanas, in ancient Sanskrit texts. In Japan, the story of Takatori Monogatari tells of a moon princess sent to Earth. Are these myths? Or are they humanity's earliest whispers of a connection to the stars? For those who resonate deeply with the term starseed, it's not about ego. It's not about being special or superior. It's about carrying a longing so deep, it feels like a frequency, a vibration of home, of skies you can't name but still miss, of memories you never made, but somehow remember. Many starseeds report periods of depression, disconnection, or even suicidal thoughts, not because they are broken, but because they feel so deeply, because they come from places where empathy is normal, where truth is telepathic, where love doesn't need proof. To those listening who feel this way, you are not broken. You are a visitor, a volunteer, a soul from somewhere else, trying to make Earth feel like home. And maybe that's your real mission. Not to change the world overnight, but to hold space, a soft, glowing space where others can feel safe remembering who they are. 2. Now breathe. And let this thought drift across your mind like a soft wind across distant water. What if the children who feel out of place are simply remembering where they were before they were born? What if the ache of not belonging is the whisper of your true home, calling you back? And what if just maybe you're not here to fit in, but to quietly, beautifully remind the world of what it forgot? You lie there, motionless, your thoughts floating like dust in the vacuum of night. And far above you, or perhaps just inside you, there is a dark shape that's been orbiting Earth for a very, very long time. Not a star, not a moon, but something older, something waiting, something that, according to some, was already circling our planet when woolly mammoths still roamed the frostbitten steppes. They call it the Black Knight satellite. For decades, this strange object has haunted the margins of space lore, a ghost in orbit, wrapped in radio signals, legends, and shadows. Officially, it doesn't exist. NASA calls it debris. Scientists shrug. But those who stare a little longer into the night sky feel something deeper. A presence. A watcher. Tonight, we drift into that mystery one that tugs at every dreamer who's ever wondered if we've been alone up here. It begins with Tesla and a whisper. The mythos of the Black Knight begins not in space, but in the mind of Nikola Tesla, the brilliant inventor who tuned into sounds the world wasn't ready to hear. In 1899, while testing a high-voltage radio receiver in Colorado Springs, Tesla claimed he intercepted an artificial signal, a series of repeating pulses that didn't match any natural sources. He believed he had tapped into an extraterrestrial communication. In a 1901 interview with Collier's Weekly, Tesla said, "It was sometime afterward when the thought flashed upon my mind that the disturbances I had observed might be due to an intelligent control." Tesla didn't know what it was, but he knew it wasn't random. It wasn't just noise. To him, it was a signal. Later interpretations, many decades after his death, connected this incident with a strange satellite orbiting Earth. Some theorists would point to Tesla's discovery as the first documented encounter with the Black Knight. But Tesla never used that name. That would come much later. Radio echoes and alien patterns. In the 1920s and 1930s, radio operators began noticing long-delayed echoes, LDEs, bizarre repetitions of their own transmissions that returned seconds or minutes later, bouncing back from somewhere unknown. This phenomenon puzzled scientists. In 1928, Norwegian engineer Jørgen Hals wrote about these echoes, baffled by their irregular delays and unexplained reflections. Some fringe theorists later claimed that these echoes were modulated intelligent responses from something orbiting Earth. In the 1970s, Scottish researcher Duncan Lunan suggested that the echoes might encode a message from a 13,000-year-old probe orbiting the Earth, sent by beings from the Epsilon Boötis star system. Lunan even claimed to decode a message. "Start here. Our home is Epsilon Boötis, which is a double star." He later retracted the claim under academic scrutiny, but the seed was planted. A mysterious satellite, a coded signal, and an age stretching back to the Ice Age. The photographs, 1960, and the spaceman cloaked in black. On February 11, 1960, newspapers buzzed with reports that the U.S. Navy had detected a dark, unidentified object orbiting the Earth at an unusual trajectory. This was during the Cold War, and fears of Soviet satellites ran high. Some suggested it was a spy satellite, but neither the U.S. nor the USSR claimed it. 3 years later, during the Gemini 7 mission, astronaut Gordon Cooper reportedly saw a glowing green object following his spacecraft. Though NASA would later deny the claim, rumors spread that it had been scrubbed from official logs. And then came the photograph. In 1998, during the STS-88 mission, the first space shuttle mission to the International Space Station, NASA released images of a strange, angular, dark object orbiting Earth. It looked like a piece of metal folded on itself, a twisted wing, or a cloaked creature adrift. To NASA, it was simple space debris, most likely a thermal blanket lost during a spacewalk. But to others, it was confirmation. The Black Knight had been spotted again. The photo, still available on NASA's official archive, continues to fuel speculation. Why does it appear so symmetrical, so alien? And why does it seem to watch us? 13,000 years. But where's the proof? The most persistent claim about the Black Knight is its alleged 13,000-year orbit. But where does this number come from? The origin is murky. Some say it comes from Lunan's radio echo analysis. Others say it's based on estimates of orbital decay, how long such an object could hypothetically remain stable without propulsion. But no direct proof has ever confirmed the satellite's existence, let alone its age. NASA has never recognized a Black Knight satellite. Mainstream astronomers agree that the object in the 1998 photo was a blanket. The 1960 radar detection likely fragmented rocket parts or early spy satellite confusion, and yet the story lives on. Mythology, archetypes, and a name, like a shadow. Where did the name Black Knight come from? Most likely, it emerged from fringe ufology in the 1980s or 1990s, perhaps a blend of medieval symbolism and Cold War paranoia. The Black Knight is a literary figure, a mysterious warrior in dark armor, neither wholly evil nor good, often watching from the margins of the battlefield. In Carl Jung's symbolic archetypes, the Black Knight could represent the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress, ignore, or fear. What if the satellite, real or imagined, is that shadow, a reflection of our ancient fear that we are not alone, and never were? Dreams in orbit, cultural echoes, and sleeping memory. For those who believe, the Black Knight is not just a satellite, it's a message in stasis, a kind of cosmic bottle tossed into Earth's sky sea. Some suggest it's an ancient monitoring device placed by an extraterrestrial civilization to observe humanity's evolution. Others say it's an AI probe, forgotten by its creators, a dark seed awaiting activation, a sentinel like the monoliths in Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey. And some spiritual thinkers propose it's not physical at all, but a psychic echo, a shared hallucination, a collective need to believe there's someone watching, not out of malice, but curiosity. Because, really, what if we were never alone? What if our first contact didn't come with lights and fanfare, but with silence and shadows? A satellite, a blanket, or a prayer in the end? The Black Knight satellite might be a misidentified piece of debris, a Cold War legend grown wild, a misinterpretation of old radio signals, a psychological projection, a real extraterrestrial probe still waiting in orbit. Or maybe it is all of those, and none of them. Maybe the Black Knight isn't a satellite at all, but an idea, endlessly orbiting the human mind. The thought that we're not the apex of cosmic history, that we're being watched by someone ancient and quiet, someone who understands the long patience of time. And maybe, one night if the sky is dark enough, you'll see it too. Not with your eyes, but with your sense of wonder. There is something deeply hypnotic about the night sky, a memory we all seem to carry in our blood, though we don't know why. For the ancient Egyptians, the stars were not just beautiful, they were maps, deities, and portals. They saw in the heavens a mirror of the Nile, a cosmic river along which gods traveled and judgment unfolded. And so they carved their understanding of the cosmos into temples, coffins, and tomb ceilings, wrapping their dead in visions of celestial geometry and sacred boats that ferried souls across eternity. What were these skyboats, and why did they matter so much? Celestial boats, ferries of the divine. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, boats or barks were more than tools of transport. They were symbols of divine journeying. Just as the Nile sustained life on Earth, so too did the celestial Nile sustain the movement of the sun, stars, and deities through the sky. One of the most important skyboats was the solar bark, also called the manjet. This was the vessel on which the sun god Ra sailed each day across the sky from east to west, and then through the underworld at night. Each evening, Ra entered the Duat, the shadowy realm of night, aboard his night bark, called the Mesektet. He was vulnerable during this journey, challenged by serpents like Apophis, symbolizing chaos and darkness. Each dawn, he emerged victorious, reborn, and began the journey again. This cycle of death and rebirth, inscribed into the sky itself, gave Egyptians a divine framework for time, death, and resurrection. What's extraordinary is how this mythos wasn't just told, it was mapped in their tombs and temples, tomb ceilings as star charts. One of the most compelling examples of Egyptian star mapping is found in the tomb of Senenmut, the architect and advisor to Queen Hatshepsut Ka, 1479-1458 BCE. On the ceiling of his tomb, a painted star chart displays constellations, lunar cycles, and decanal stars used to track time at night. It's considered the earliest known star map in Egypt. Here, we see that the Egyptians didn't just tell myths, they plotted them into cosmological grids. Later, the astronomical ceiling in the tomb of Seti I KV-17 expands on this tradition. Located in the Valley of the Kings, Seti's ceiling is a stunning visualization of night skies, complete with goddess Nut stretching across the sky, swallowing the sun each evening and birthing it each dawn. Ra's solar bark is drawn clearly, floating through Nut's body, sailing past familiar constellations. The sky, to them, was a living entity, and their maps were sacred diagrams, a fusion of astronomy, mythology, and funerary magic. The Dendera zodiac stars, symbols, and secrets. One of the most famous and mysterious of these celestial maps is the Dendera zodiac, found on the ceiling of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Dating to the Greco-Roman period circa 50 BCE, it shows a circular star map with representations of the zodiac signs, constellations, and planetary movements. Though it blends Egyptian and Hellenistic elements, scholars believe it still preserves older indigenous traditions. The presence of boats carrying gods across the sky is prominent, suggesting the bark symbolism remained central even after centuries of cultural evolution. The Dendera zodiac also shows the stars of Orion linked with the god Osiris and Sirius, connected to Isis. Their annual rising marked the flooding of the Nile and the renewal of life. This was not mere coincidence, it was an astronomical ritual, mapping the afterlife with stars. Skyboats were also intimately tied to the Egyptian afterlife. Texts like the Book of the Dead and Pyramid texts describe the soul's journey through the heavens after death, often in a solar or lunar boat. The dead king was said to become a star, joining Ra in his bark to sail the sky eternally. One pyramid text utterance 263 reads, "The sky is given to you. The stars are made to serve you. and you will sail the sky in the bark of Ra. This wasn't metaphor, it was theology, cosmology, and hope. In many royal tombs, the ceilings were painted with scenes of Ra's bark floating through the sky, surrounded by stars, constellations, and protective deities. The astronomical ceiling of the tomb of Ramesses 66 KV9 is another masterpiece depicting Ra's solar journey through both sky and underworld. Even coffin lids were adorned with star charts and skyboats, so the deceased would know which constellations to follow and how to board the divine ferry after death. Sirius and the Dog Star. One of the most sacred stars to the Egyptians was Sirius Sopdet, a blue-white star that appears just before the Nile flood each year. It was considered a herald of fertility and rebirth. Ancient priests aligned temples and calendars to its heliacal rising. In star charts and temple carvings, Sirius is often shown riding in a small boat, sometimes accompanied by Anubis or Isis. Why a boat? Because even the star must sail through the sky to reach its place. The entire worldview of the Egyptians was aquatic and cosmic gods, souls, stars, and even time itself moved like rivers, winding through heavenly waters aboard celestial ships. Were these just myths? Modern scholars sometimes debate whether the Egyptian star maps were literal astronomical tools or simply symbolic cosmologies. But in truth, they were both. According to Dr. Juan Antonio Belmonte, an expert in archaeoastronomy, many Egyptian temples and monuments are aligned to solstices, equinoxes, and stellar risings not by chance, but by sophisticated knowledge. The sky was a sacred calendar, and the barks were metaphors for the cycles that ruled both gods and humans. Some fringe theorists have speculated more boldly that the celestial boats may have encoded technological knowledge or even described contact with sky visitors. These interpretations are speculative, but they underscore how powerful and suggestive this imagery still is. When you see a carved stone with stars and a curved boat drifting through the heavens, your mind begins to wonder, is this art, science, or something else entirely? Final thought. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a voyage. And to take that voyage, one needed a vessel, a bark of stars, a map of the sky, and a heart that had been weighed and found light. In the temples of Dendera, in the tombs of kings, and in the ceilings that glimmer with painted stars, you can still see those boats. They float in silence above the chambers of the dead, waiting to ferry another soul into the great beyond. As you lie in the dark tonight, imagine them skyboats drifting quietly along the river of stars, carrying dreams and gods alike. You lie back beneath the hush of the night sky, and something feels different, not because of what you see, but because of what you've been told not to see. Somewhere behind the silence, buried in forgotten file cabinets and redacted documents, there once existed a program that looked up not to dream, but to explain, to contain wonder, to cage it in logic. It was called Project Blue Book. From 1952 to 1969, the United States Air Force ran this official study of unidentified flying objects, amassing over 12,000 reports from pilots, radar operators, civilians, scientists, and even astronauts. Some were weather balloons, some were aircraft misidentified by sleep-deprived minds, but others were never explained at all. The story begins in the shadow of World War II, in an era ripe with Cold War paranoia and skyward obsession. In the late 1940s, waves of UFO sightings across the United States, most notably the Roswell incident of 1947, forced the government to address a question it would rather have ignored: were we alone? The Air Force's first effort to tackle the mystery came through Project Sign 1948, and Project Grudge 1949, both predecessors to Blue Book. These programs were short-lived, often dismissive, and shrouded in bureaucratic caution. But then, in 1952, the sightings surged more than 1,500 that year alone. Civilian panic met media frenzy. Something more structured was needed. Thus, Project Blue Book was born. Its official goals were simple on paper: to determine if UFOs posed a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. But behind the scenes, its role was more ambiguous. Was it research or damage control? Enter Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a respected astronomer and scientific consultant for Blue Book. At first, Hynek was a skeptic. He considered most sightings to be hoaxes or misinterpretations. But over time, case after case wore away his certainty. By the 1960s, he had transformed into a cautious believer, stating publicly, "I had started out as an outright debunker, taking great joy in cracking what seemed at first to be puzzling cases. But I saw the databank grow, and grow, and grow, and I began to ask myself, what if Project Blue Book analyzed over 12,618 reports? Of those, 701 cases remained officially unexplained despite all the effort to fit them into neat categories. Take, for example, the Lubbock Lights incident in 1951, where dozens of witnesses in Texas reported formations of bluish-white lights flying in a V-shaped pattern. Photographs were taken. Radar data hinted at real objects. And yet, the Air Force declared it was most likely birds reflecting city lights. Or the Mantell incident of 1948, in which pilot Thomas Mantell died while pursuing a UFO in his fighter jet. The object was described as metallic and tremendous in size. The Air Force claimed it was a weather balloon. But critics questioned the altitude inconsistencies and classified documents surrounding the case. Over time, Blue Book developed a pattern. For each case, there was an explanation even when that explanation required reaching far beyond plausibility. Critics began to suspect that the real purpose of Project Blue Book wasn't discovery, but dismissal. And then came the Condon Report. In 1966, due to public pressure and congressional interest, the Air Force commissioned the University of Colorado to conduct an independent investigation into UFOs under the direction of physicist Dr. Edward Condon. The resulting 1968 report concluded that further study of UFOs was unlikely to yield any scientific benefit. It essentially declared the phenomenon unworthy of serious academic attention. Within a year, Project Blue Book was officially terminated. Its closure, however, did not end the mystery. It deepened it. Because something odd happened after Blue Book's curtain fell. Sightings continued. Reports flooded in. Radar anomalies, pilot encounters, and even astronaut testimonies piled up. And yet now, there was no official channel, no civilian hotline, just silence. Decades later, in a surprising twist, the U.S. government admitted the existence of another classified program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program AATIP, active from 2007 to 2012. Suddenly, whispers from the past had become voices again. The skies were speaking and the government was, once again, listening. Was Project Blue Book a genuine effort to study UFOs? Or was it, as some suggest, a strategic exercise in deflection and narrative control? One thing is certain. Blue Book left behind a legacy. Its archives now declassified and publicly accessible through the U.S. National Archives are a treasure trove of human curiosity. Witness accounts are filled with awe, fear, wonder, and the haunting feeling that we are not alone. These are not just documents. They are testimonies from people who looked up and couldn't forget what they saw. Perhaps the most fascinating detail is this: even Blue Book's final scientific director, Dr. Hynek, went on to found the Center for UFO Studies and argued for continued, open-minded inquiry. His famous close encounter classification system, yes, the one used in Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, is still referenced today. So tonight, as you lay still under this same eternal sky, remember, there was once a time when even governments tried to explain the unexplainable and failed. In the hush between stars, some files never truly close. Tonight, the cosmos is not an empty canvas. It is a living archive. Each chapter we've traveled through is a page in a story carved not on stone, but in light, memory, and the spaces between breaths. We've met, eyes too big for silence, watching from shadows, especially the grays, nameless hours that slipped away, leaving questions suspended in time, crop circles curving like whispers in wheat, signals from the void brief, almost erased, skyboats and celestial charts, guiding souls through Egyptian night, fragments of Martian geographies, inviting our gaze and our doubt, abduction stories that changed our collective awareness, soul travelers reminding us that maps don't always need borders, government efforts to contain wonder, only to discover it grows in absence, a satellite of shadows rumored to circle our world since the Ice Age, beyond proof, the human compass. Through these mysteries, one idea pulses clearly: our deepest need is not for answers, but for orientation. Not every puzzle has a solution, but each one offers a sense of direction to wonder, to question, to lean in. Ancient star maps show that the Egyptians measured their afterlives in cosmic charts. Crop circles suggest Earth herself might encode messages in geometry. Voices like Betty and Barney Hill remind us that time itself can tick in different rhythms. Project Blue Book, with its thousands of reports, tells us that our official narrative seldom embraces the unexplained. Turn your search. And yet, when scientists finally listen, truths emerge that are both fragile and profound. Turn news. Between archetype and anomaly, we've danced between science and myth, examining phenomena that might be extraterrestrial, interdimensional, military, or deeply symbolic. We stand at a boundary where psychologist Carl Jung's archetypes blend with ufologist J. Allen Hynek's Close Encounters, and where Gregory Egidian reminds us UFOs are also mirrors of the culture that watches them. Turn search. The Black Knight satellite sits in that boundary, a figure of legend and possibly debris. The face on Mars shows that sometimes we project ourselves onto the void. Ancient astronaut theories, no matter how fringe, tap into something visceral: humanity's timeless desire to trace its origins to the sky. Turn search. The sky inside us. Perhaps all these threads point inward more than outward. The true voyage isn't just to stars, but to the vast terrain of wonder within. To remember that wonder doesn't depend on certainty. To trust that mysteries can hold meaning without being solved. To feel that every sighting, signal, shape, or silence speaks to something at the very edge of understanding. Final invitation. So now, in the quiet dark, let memory fold itself around truth and doubt alike. Let the wisdom of ancient nights, of winds shifting over crop fields, of signals traveling across centuries, come to rest in your heart. You don't have to choose a side, believer or skeptic. You don't need to prove. You only need to remain open, because beneath everything lies a single current. The sky is not empty. It is full of histories waiting to be remembered, ears waiting to listen, and hearts waiting to be moved. Now you're safe. The world can wait. Sweet dreams.